The Ravens just won what might be one of the most exciting games I've ever watched on Sunday against the Cincinnati Bengals. There was good offense, drama, and even some good defense sprinkled in. Definitely only sprinkled though, but we'll get to that later. The Ravens had both a classic Ravens win, causing every fan heart palpitations through the entire second half, while at the same time having a very uncharacteristic Ravens win by getting punched in the mouth and actually coming back with their own punches and landing them. This was by no means a perfect game, and there are more than a few flaws that this Ravens team needs to fix. But we're over 500 and got a win against an AFC North opponent on the road. I'll take it. This was a great win for the team, but there's a lot to get into, so let's get to it. Welcome in, everyone. This is Jordan with Ravens Flash Report, and the first thing I want to touch on with this game is the battle between Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. These two combined for nearly 750 yards through the air and almost 800 if you include Lamar's rushing numbers. They also threw a combined 9 touchdowns and 1 turnover each, but they were also getting everybody involved. 7 different Bengal players caught passes from Burrow, and 9 different Ravens caught passes from Jackson. Despite the fact that the Ravens took an early lead in this game, neither team really seemed to find a rhythm on offense during the first quarter. During my preview video, I mentioned that I want the Ravens to get more out of the pass catchers and get them more involved without forgetting about the run game, and that kind of happened. Despite the fact that Derrick Henry got 92 yards rushing on 15 carries and a touchdown on the day, the Bengals actually did a decent job containing him after the first quarter. That being said, big shout out to the King for getting 100 career rushing touchdowns and 10,000 rushing yards. That's a massive career accomplishment and very poetic for it to happen in the same game. I'm not going to lie to you. Going into halftime, I was, as the saying goes, not a happy camper. We saw possibly one of the worst sequences in recent memory from this Ravens team and coaching staff. I said a little earlier in this season that a lot of good things are forgotten in a loss, and that, on the other side, there are many bad things that are swept under the rug in a win. But the clock management issues and decision-making by the players and coaches at the end of the second quarter is something that this Ravens team absolutely cannot afford to forget, and I know the fan base won't let them off the hook, as well they shouldn't. If this team wants to be a playoff contender and make it all the way to a Super Bowl, they have to stop making junior varsity mistakes, which allow their opponents to gain momentum and get back into the game. Now, don't get me wrong. The Bengals were not nearly as far out of the game as the Raiders or the Cowboys earlier this season, but the fact still remains that between the second quarter and the third, the Ravens went from being up 14-7 to being down 14-24, and that 10-point gap stayed with them until the fourth quarter. This Bengals team was clearly getting the better of the Ravens secondary for a majority of the game, but some of the bonehead plays and decisions made by the Ravens were the reason that Lamar and this offense had to crawl and climb their way back into it. So let's move on to some of the other positives and negatives we saw from this game, like Lamar from the pocket. I know that we as Ravens fans understand just how special Lamar Jackson is, but his ability to completely change his game based on what's needed or working still impresses me. He went from only throwing the ball a combined 33 times during weeks 3 and 4 for a total of 338 yards to throwing it 42 times against the Bengals for a total of 348 yards. Not to mention increasing his passing touchdown total on the season from 5 to 9 in one afternoon without adding a pick. The Ravens had a difficult time running the ball effectively on Sunday on early downs, which got them into 3rd and 5 or longer multiple times. Early in the game, Lamar was missing guys or guys were dropping passes, and in my opinion, some of that came from not being balanced over the last couple of weeks. But the second half of this game flipped the first half on its head. After the Bengals opened up the second half with a drive that lasted for what felt like the entire third quarter, ending in a touchdown for Higgins, the Ravens responded with their own touchdown drive, one that consisted of a 15-yard catch by Flowers and a 55-yard play by Charlie Kolar, capped off by Isaiah Likely's first touchdown of the day. And then almost every possession after that by both teams ended in touchdowns going back and forth for the entire fourth quarter. At the time, Ja'Marr Chase's 70-yard touchdown was an absolute backbreaker, and something that I was worried this Ravens team wouldn't be able to overcome from a momentum standpoint. But as I have said before, I love being proven wrong when it comes to doubting Lamar and these Ravens. When Lamar Jackson fumbled the snap, then scooped it up, then proceeded to run backwards while stiff-arming Sam Hubbard not once but twice, and then throwing across his body while falling out of bounds a perfect strike to Likely in the end zone, I told my wife that may be the best Lamar Jackson play I've ever seen. But going back and looking at it on the highlight video, I think that might be one of the most impressive football plays I've ever seen from anyone. There's always the debate about which quarterback would you take when starting a franchise. The ESPN guys and other national media shows do this all the time. But when they have this conversation, I almost never hear anyone bring up a quarterback's ability to do what Lamar Jackson did on that play. Because no one else can. One of the defining plays of the game for the Ravens came late in the fourth quarter from my boy, Marlon Humphrey, with his second interception of the season. The fact that he was covering Jamar Chase on that play makes it all the more sweeter. But the sweetness didn't stop there, as that interception by Humphrey led to the Ravens' drive that set up Justin Tucker for a game-tying, redemption-filling 56-yard field goal. And if you saw it, you could tell that that thing would have been good from 60+. So y'all can forget that "is he washed" defamation that's been going around. Now, as much as I love Lamar Jackson, that fumble in overtime was inexcusable, and is, in large part, the reason many in that debate of which quarterback would you take don't choose Jackson. He's prone to turning the ball over late in the game. To be fair to Lamar, it's not that he makes bad decisions, it's that the Ravens rely on him to be Superman too often, and even Superman can make mistakes when overextended. The fact that the Ravens still managed to somehow win that game was due to their defense finally waking up and being able to stop the Bengals' offense by holding them to just 3 yards on the ground after the fumble. I won't say that Evan McPherson's 53-yard missed field goal to win the game was karma or anything like that. We saw that the hold was bad. But the fact that the announcers were talking about how perfect he had been in fourth quarters and overtimes right before does put a bit of a grinchy smile on my face. Finally, let's go ahead and get back to that Derrick Henry 51-yard rumble down the sideline that basically sealed the game for the Ravens. Even though I just said rumble, which invokes an image of some bumbling, uncoordinated oaf, Derrick Henry is anything but that. As a former track athlete, the thought of someone that large moving that quickly over that distance is entirely mind-blowing. What's also mind-blowing is how quickly the last 3 games have shut everyone's mouth about Henry falling off of a cliff. At this point, we don't even know if he's hit the top of the hill. I also got a little chuckle out of the fact that it was Geno Stone that had to make the tackle on Henry. And while I was a little miffed at the fact that Henry wasn't able to finish off the Bengals with that run right there, I was happy that whoever stole the headset from John Harbaugh and told him to just kick the game-winning field goal gave Tucker another game-winning kick just after he tied it only a few drives ago. This secondary is still getting burned horribly by most quarterbacks they face. The offensive line didn't block nearly as well for the run in this game, and while the balance from this offense was much better, it still took way too long for this team to get a rhythm going in this game. Those are just a few of the issues that this Ravens team needs to clean up to keep playing winning football in the NFL this season. But they are playing winning football. After the Ravens lost at home to the Raiders in Week 2, a lot of fans were worried, and rightfully so, about the next 3 games on the schedule. At Dallas, Buffalo comes to Baltimore, and Cincinnati on the road. All good and competitive teams who would challenge the Ravens and potentially ruin their season if all 3 were able to beat us. But they didn't. The Ravens went from 0-2 to 3-2, beating 2 good teams on the road while beating one of the best teams at home in primetime by 25 points. Next week, the Ravens host this year's version of the 2023 Houston Texans, with a 4-1 Jaden Daniels-led Washington Commanders team coming to town. Baltimore's got 1 week to try and fix its issues before another playoff-caliber team comes to them. But at least we now know that the Ravens can take a few hits and get back up swinging. If you guys enjoyed this Ravens-Bengals postgame breakdown, leave it a like. If you're new around here, subscribe. And if you watched the game or even just the highlights, comment down below your favorite moment from this Ravens Week 5 win. As always, guys, stay safe out there and go Ravens.